This is Tuesday, August 23rd, and my name is Jim Norgard. I'm interviewing Andy Tennyson from
Burlington, Wisconsin.
And Andy, you're the husband of Louise Tennyson, whom we interviewed, a member of the Strangite branch of the Mormon Church. And I understand that you did not come into the Strangite faith as a child, but that you were practicing Catholic. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I was brought up in a good Catholic family. I think a lot of my folks, and I enjoyed my Catholic upbringing. And actually, I had after my high school or my grade school graduation, I went into a Catholic seminary for a period of 4 years.
Oh, really?
So I have certainly been involved with the Catholic religion and have appreciated my education in it.
Now, what drew you to the Strangite Mormon Church? They're following James Jesse Strang as a prophet. What drew you in that direction from the Catholic faith?
Well, I did grow up in Burlington. We are from Burlington, and of course that's where I did also grow up at. And after my senior year in high school, I decided, and it was kind of a deciding factor then for a lot of people. They encouraged the seniors to reevaluate at the seminary. They encouraged them to reevaluate their direction, whether they wanted to continue on or whether they wanted to make a break and do something different in life. In other words, they certainly didn't want to keep you captivated. They were very open-minded about it. And at that point, I had realized, in fact, might I add, I had an older brother who was at the seminary also, and I kind of followed in his footsteps. And I believe he stayed there a year after I had left. I can't remember now, it's been so many years, but I think I began to realize also that I perhaps had gone to the seminary simply, I admired him a lot, and perhaps had followed his footsteps a little bit. And looking at it that way, and there were a lot of seniors that did decide to go in a different direction at that point. I don't remember, maybe even as much as 50% of them. That was back in '67. At that point, I had gone to the University of Wisconsin, which was obviously quite a change from the seminary life that was somewhat enclosed to a point as far as a lot of interaction with the outside society. We went home every weekend, but nevertheless, you never really got out in the midst of society, or at least certainly I never did. I came from a farming background, and when I went to the university, of course, it was during the Vietnam War era. There was a lot of black rights talked about, equal rights there, and so there was a lot of, I guess you'd say, turmoil and commotion going on. Young people back then revolting against, I guess, the norms of society in general. And as a result, it brought me to face my background and my view on life. And I believe, obviously, I started looking around and became disenchanted with the Catholic religion not because I knew that it was wrong or felt that it was definitely wrong. I just had never investigated anything else, I guess I would say, more than anything. And so as time went on, I ran across my former wife, who was a member of the church at that time. And
how do you refer to it that you don't call yourself Mormons, or do you?
Well, it's kind of a slang term.
Okay.
We actually are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
And I believe the term Mormon came with, because we do believe in the Book of Mormon, that is what I would call Mormons, I guess. It was a term put on us. So anyways, that's how I got kind of involved with this religion, through her and interaction with people at that time.
Would you feel comfortable speaking about the aspects of the Catholic Church that you became, or what disenchanted you?
Well, I guess I remember they required us to read a book called The True Believer, and I don't remember even the name of the author back then. And what it was is just a breakdown of mass movements of the past 2,000 years or whatever. And of course, some of those were mass movements made by through the Catholic Church, the Crusades, different movements, the Spanish Inquisition, things like that sort of thing. And as a result, I began to realize that perhaps am a member of the church strictly because my folks were, and that was a fact. I had never really investigated the religion per se for my own self, and I guess those things drew questions in my mind. Yes. And that's what I would say.
And some of the social and historical factors that called into question some of the church's history, the Catholic Church's history for you then?
It was, and I realized at times many people thought, and I think they gave us this book to read because there were a lot of movements, obviously, anti-war movement, the black movement, and they wanted people not to just join a movement for the sake of the thing to do, but whether you really truly believed it or not. And so that's why I did question whether my belief, my support of being Catholicism in general, was it really in me, or maybe I should at least look around, I guess, if nothing else. Not saying it was wrong, but is there something different or better or whatever?
So actually, in your seminar training, the book you read actually opened the doorways for you to look and encourage you to look around.
I would say yes, it did. Which I think, as we do believe in this religion, even that you should really find out for yourself. We surely do not believe that people should just be a member to be a member of something. You want to be a member because you believe in what is going on, as people should do with any belief. They should really truly believe what they believe in, and therefore follow up on it.
And when you met your first wife, who was a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, what specifically did you find in her faith that drew you?
I guess I would say, this is kind of a quick answer, the beliefs made sense. And sense in the sense that it was common sense. In other words, it wasn't something that was mystical, something unanswerable, something that you just needed to believe because there's no way of explaining it. And that does not mean, I mean to correct myself by saying, it doesn't mean that I understand everything about God and so forth and so forth. But the religion has a good common sense about it, and as a result, I do feel that if there is a true God, of course, that He would not put together some unknown and I'm not saying bizarre because the Catholic religion is bizarre. I'm talking in general, just some unknown, unusual way of living or believing just for the sake of living or believing it. But there should be some reasoning behind it. And in other words, I think the Lord is very reasonable and logical and has much common sense to Him.
Could you maybe give a specific example, just what you mean by the common sense basis of your faith, your current faith? What to you specifically makes it common sense and reasonable?
Well, if I might, and this is not to belittle any religion, there were certain things, and I'm trying to think, certain dogmas that were, let's say the dogma of the Trinity. And I will not go into our belief, but I believe the Trinity at times can be quite confusing. To me, it was. And I do believe some religions just say, well, that's just the way it is and you just got to believe it. The explanation that this belief gives makes sense to me. It explains each segment of the Trinity in a reasonable and understandable fashion that would make a very possible reality to it.
Could you, I appreciate you don't want to go into great detail, but could you give us just a very simple idea of how that might be
fits
explained?
Together.
Yes, yeah, for the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Trinity.
Well, I don't feel, I'll be quite honest, I don't feel qualified. I feel like I will say things, but I will give an explanation. But I do feel like I would prefer to have somebody else explain it, but I'll say it the best way I know how. We do believe that God created all things. God, we would call God the Father. He did create all things. And the way it is written in our religion, and the way we believe, is that He also, and I'm sure this seems blasphemous to some people, He actually did create Jesus Christ. He was His first creation. Now, Jesus Christ is our Savior, and He is our God also. We are surely not saying in any respect that He is not our Savior, because we believe this as any Christian faith believes. I believe all Christian faiths believe that Jesus Christ is our Savior, and we do believe the same. And He is also our God, under the Father. And the Holy Spirit is explained not heavily in a few pieces of the text of our religion, and I think it's explained somewhat as the mind of God. In other words, He has, if you, as with, I think as, and I know the Catholics do this, have I'm trying to think of the ordination for the gift of the Holy Spirit. It's confirmation. That's the word I'm thinking of. And we do believe at that time, in a sense, it is not a God of itself. It is a gift from the Father in heaven. And it is something of His, I don't know if you want to say His spirit, His mind. It's a spirit of God. And it's not a God in itself, though. It's not an entity in itself. It is part of the three. And the three do work together, obviously. The mind of God, and God the Father, and, of course, Jesus Christ. But we do believe, I guess, from my understanding of the Catholic religion and my upbringing, that it's a triangle. All three are one, and one is the same, and yet it's hard to explain it. We're there from the very beginning, and it's not because of the writings that we have. I hope I'm not getting too wordy here. We do believe that some of the sacred records were lost, and that is why the Book of the Law, which my wife has indicated, and of course people know of, that James brought forth, was actually part of the Bible at one time, and it is mentioned in the Old Testament, the Book of the Law. This Book of the Law was kept in the ark that the Jews carried around, and the law of God they got from Moses on Mount Sinai, etc., etc. This book was a very real book, and it contained the basic laws of God, of His people, and of His society. These laws dictated, as my wife had indicated, how a society should be set up in general, how it's to be run, the hierarchy, etc., etc. It doesn't give all the details, but it gives the basic concept of the laws of God and how He expects people to live. Am I talking too much? I hope I'm not.
No,
Okay.
that's a very good. I feel clearer on the distinction.
And the idea is why these laws, and obviously why these laws were given. I think all religions, all Christian religions, do believe that man has always rebelled against God. At least, certainly from the past, from Adam, he disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden, as with Eve also, Adam and Eve. And certainly the people under Noah, they were an abomination before the Lord, and according to the way it's written, whether I know there's a lot of theories that this is just a story or whatever, but it does talk about man's rebellion against God, and so he destroyed a lot of people at that time, or at least certainly the way the story goes. As with Moses, he led the children of Israel out of Egypt with many miracles, and even the children of Israel were disenchanted with Moses at different times because the Pharaoh, for one thing, did not allow them to use straw anymore to build the bricks. And so they were not always happy with Moses, yet even when, after a series of quite outstanding miracles, Moses did finally lead them out. The Pharaoh agreed to let them go. And as the story goes, they went to Mount Sinai, where after all these great miracles, Moses went up, and I think he was gone for 40 days. And it's written that there was lightnings and the loud thunder, and they could hear the voice of God up on the mountain, and they wanted Moses to deal with God. They didn't want to deal with him. They said, and that's how it's written, that they sent Moses went up alone, basically, to interact with God, because the Israelites were afraid of him. They didn't know him, I guess. And yet God wanted, and it's also written that God wanted to make the Israelites a nation of priests and kings. Anyways, they also rebelled. At that point, they built a golden calf. They went back to their old beliefs of being with the Egyptians for such a length of time. I think it was 300-400 years there with the Egyptians. They picked up a lot of the characteristics and traits. And they thought, well, we have to have a God of our own, or they thought something of some nature of that sort. And so again, they were in rebellion. So I guess what I'm saying is it shows over an extended period of time man's continual rebellion against God. So as time progresses and goes on, God does set forth certain laws, as in the book of the law, to say, this is how I created you, this is how you should be living. God has a right to do that. He created this just as a father would have a right to tell his children how his household should be run or kept up. Because there are only certain, I hope I'm not talking too much here, okay, because as in the very beginning, certain angels who were in the presence of God himself, it is written that they rebelled against God, Satan and his band, and a third of the host fell from heaven. 1/3 of his spirits in his presence rebelled. So it shows I would say, how does one say that? We always say we have free will, which is the truth. It is a gift greater from God than what we really realize, free will. He does not force us to do anything, as he never forced the spirits even in heaven to do anything. They rebelled due to a particular circumstance, and as a result, that influence is upon us also. They fell, and I believe it's stated that they fell to earth. He cast them out of heaven down to earth. We do believe that they're here. Now, of course, various beliefs can be taken as people see fit. We do go by the written word and how things are written. We're not here, James never made up things. He only added to what was already there, or corrected perhaps some errors that have been created in the past.
James Strang, you're speaking of.
James J. Strang, that's correct. And And of course, that's why God continually sends prophets to the earth, to try to get people on the correct path. Many prophets were, of course, sent to the Israelites over a given period of time. And when Christ came himself, Christ, the Son of God, came to the Israelites, they were in such a poor state of affairs, even they didn't know who he was, and they also rebelled against him. As it is written, they had him killed. Christ was the perfect, you could say the perfect person, perfect prophet. He was the Son of God. Even in his perfect fashion, where they could find really no fault with him at all, they even killed him. And they freely did this. They weren't forced to kill him. It was part of their free will. So I guess I'm stating these things saying that man is in very much a rebellion, and that's why laws are set forth from God, so that he might learn how to live as God intended. Certainly God does not want imperfect people up in heaven, but he does want people to be up in heaven. And as a result, they have to follow a particular procedure in order to get there. You would want to, if you have children, you'd want them to gain your inheritance. If your children are very rebellious and foolish with what they had and squandered things right and left, perhaps you would not want to give them your inheritance.
So therein comes the book of law, which
is something James brought forth simply because it was lost in the past.
Okay.
And it certainly doesn't mean that nobody lived good lives. That is not to say it. It gives them a better edge on what God does expect of you.
Could you talk a little bit about Burlington and the sense of community there? Do people there, folks there, have a historical sense of the importance of that community, and what is that?
The area in Burlington, Voree, is what we call a stake of Zion. But it was a place that was set aside, we believe, by revelation through God, from God, not from God, I should say, that James understood, that it was a place for saints to gather, and that it would be kept free from a lot of interference. James actually was there first for a period of time, and for various reasons it didn't work out well for him there. And of course that's why he came up to Beaver Island. But the people there that are there, and there aren't a lot of us there, but nevertheless we do have a very...
How many would you say?
Well,
current members of the Strangite Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, I would say, and there's probably seriously only about 100 really active members, and they're not all there in Burlington. We have maybe 200 to 300 members altogether. We're quite a small bunch, and probably don't seem like anybody, but to us it is very valuable. I think all the members are very dedicated and believe very much in what they're doing. I think the difference between our thoughts of why we are who we are, as opposed to just being in any other religion, is that we feel we do certainly believe that we have better opportunity. It would be, as a comparison without getting complicated, saying that people have a better opportunity in the United States, let's say, to prosper and to improve their lives and their livelihoods, as well as their children's and their families, better than they would, let's say, in some place in Afghanistan,
okay,
or Iraq.
Having better guidance and better community support, the Book of Law and things like that give you that advantage? Is that what you're saying? Or
basically correct. We believe, because we, and I guess it seems rather arrogant to say, and it's not really arrogant, it's a belief. I guess at that point we'd say everybody in the United States is arrogant if they believe that living in the United States gives you better opportunity. All we're saying is it gives you better opportunity, but we believe we have the a proper authority from God. We do think that God does communicate with a multitude of people, but we also do believe that He has a particular line of authority that does come from Him alone. It is, as James says in the book of the law, it is kind of like saying, if a person wants to become a citizen of the United States, they may believe and actually practice good citizenship, but until they are actually incorporated into the system through being, what's the word I want to use? You have to go through a procedure and take an oath.
Naturalization. Naturalization.
Yes, that's it. And so it's the same thing we believe with God in this church. That I know the common belief is that once you believe, you're there. But all indications are that you can't take one phrase and elaborate upon it. You have to look at the overall picture. And of course, by faith you are saved. There's no doubt about it. And by being a good law-abiding citizen, you'd say that you will enjoy many freedoms and luxuries of this society. But you have to become a true member of society first. That gives you many more freedoms and luxuries than just being someone who would come here for a visit.
And essentially then becoming a part of the church and following the book of law is that process of becoming a true member, from your understanding? From
our beliefs, okay. Yes. You need to have the authority from God in that respect. Or come in through the door, as he says.
Very, very well explained. Now this is your first time to Beaver Island, and I'm real curious. We talked to your wife Louise about her coming here and her experiences here. What did it feel like to you to step foot on the land here? What was it? What was the meaning, feelings to you in your travels here?
It was, I guess quite honestly, I would have to say it was very interesting. Did I have any particular inner emotions or feelings? I guess quite honestly, I try in most things in life to look at things pretty straightforward. Yet, of course, I do feed, as I think we all do, we feed off a little bit of inner feelings, inner thoughts, and I think we should. I do think God does interact with us in various ways, and I don't think we should ever shut that out, but I did want to look at the situation pretty much for what it is. I did want to see what the island was like. I was very interested to see the type of place that James set up his I guess you call it his kingdom. That's how it's stated. That's how he states it. And it's very interesting. I'm very impressed with the place. I think, and I'm actually, I have to say I'm quite impressed with the people, actually, as far as very friendly, seem to be very considerate. I haven't met a lot of the people, but they always wave when you're passing by them on a vehicle. But the area itself was a nice place for him to establish something. And of course, we do believe it was through revelation that he was supposed to establish it here. So I think but it was a good place to do it at.
What do you like especially about it? What aspects of it do you see as positive?
Positive. Well, my limited understanding. Of course, this happened for him, obviously, 150 years ago, and apparently the fishing grounds were quite good then, which aren't quite as good today anymore. The timber was certainly much better back then than it is today. Not that the timber that is here now, it was a possibility for a great economic development, or a good economic development, put it that way. The grounds do seem, I come from a little bit of a farming background, of course. I would say that you definitely have to put some effort into farming it, but it apparently was done, and you could do it. In other words, a lot of timber to clear, and the soil does not seem to be overly deep. Nevertheless, I think James stepped forward and made a point to say, if this is what we're supposed to do, then we're going to make the best of it that we could. And he did seem to be rather, I think, a rather good leader, and the people apparently were reasonably industrious to develop the area. So, yeah, I think it was a good spot. And of course, it is set aside from the mainland. I can even feel myself having a little different sense of area as opposed to the mainland. It's certainly even a sense of being here that you are. Of course, the atmosphere of today, 2005, it's a little more, I would say, laid back. You can go a little more at your own speed, or more easy to develop your own life or lifestyle as you desire, as opposed probably to being on the mainland. So, and I imagine it was somewhat of the same back then.
So very practically, there's some real positive benefits to the resources and the isolation here.
I would say so, and I think James, again, he was commanded to do this, so I didn't feel like he had. I don't think he had a real choice. Of course, I think this is something that he was just plain told to do. Maybe many people feel that it was his choice. We don't believe it to be so. Mm-hmm. But of course, having a people, what we feel like a people of God, it would be easier to help them to be a good people, let's say a righteous people, away from some of the influences that were around about. Obviously today, and certainly we don't claim to be righteous. We strive for righteousness, and we should, as I think all good human people should do, is strive for righteousness and goodness. We should always make improvements. We should always be better than what we are. So I think the opportunity perhaps was greater being in a more remote area. The influences are a little less strong.
Drugs, alcohol,
any of those things. I mean, certainly if you're an inner core in some city throughout the United States, it would be tough to be a good person. I think, and I'm certainly not saying there aren't good people in there. It would certainly be easier to be out in some rural area, let's say, to be a good person with good community around you than it would be in an inner core. And I'm not saying the world was an inner core back then. I'm just saying as a strong example, showing one as opposed to the other.
Let's take that that tragic day in 1856 when the prophet James Jesse Strang was